Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. My name is Sara Hamilton, and I'm a marine biologist here at OSU. I study kelp forests, as you see behind me, which are incredibly vibrant, productive underwater forests made up of large seaweeds called kelps. In studying kelp forests and the creatures that live within them, I take an applied science approach, which means that I try to create science that will help managers and policymakers make well-informed, science-based decisions about how to preserve and sustainably use our coastal ecosystems. Today, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about where I came from, why I decided to become a scientist, and why I keep going in science. Knowing where I came from, I don't think anyone would have ever guessed that I would grow up to be a marine biologist. I didn't even grow up near the ocean. I grew up in a small town on the western edge of Virginia, buried in the Appalachian Mountains. My hometown was a rural, working class, and pretty conservative town of about 25,000 people, and I certainly didn't grow up knowing any scientists. While it was a beautiful and quiet place to grow up, it also had a very male-dominated culture and only a single, pretty mediocre public school system. I just didn't fit in very well in my hometown. I was this intensely smart, outspoken, aspiring young woman in a town that didn't have many educational resources and seemed to expect women to play pretty traditional roles as wives and mothers. I didn't feel like as a woman, my ideas or my brain were taken very seriously, or that I could act in any way that was unfeminine, or that there were really any jobs available to me other than mother, teacher, or maybe nurse, none of which I wanted to be. I actually left my hometown when I was 14 to accept a full ride scholarship to a private school in another state because I felt like I had to leave if I ever wanted to have access to a better education or to escape those pretty constricting set of expectations for women and girls in my hometown. So I left to go to this fancy private school, but throughout high school, I still wasn't much of a biologist or even really that interested in science. Having grown up in the mountains, I wasn't actually exposed to the ocean until I was in my early 20s. In fact, the first time I ever went snorkeling, I was 20 years old. My mother and I went on a day-long snorkeling trip in the Florida Keys around a coral reef. And for the first time in my life, I got to see sea turtles and jellyfish and barracuda. I was so entranced, so enthralled with the beauty and the vitality of that reef that I came back up from snorkeling. And I was like, this right here, I got to get back in the water. Within the next year, I found some scholarships and used them to get scuba certified so that I could continue spending time in the ocean. But that wasn't actually when I decided I wanted to be a scientist. I didn't decide that I wanted to be a scientist until I was in college, when I was lucky enough to study abroad on a small, dusty fishing island in the Caribbean of about 2,000 people. My study abroad program there emphasized not only marine science, but also marine resource management. In the morning, I would go down to the docks and watch local fishermen bring in their catch of parrotfish and grouper and sell them in open-air fish markets. These fish were their livelihoods, how they made their money and fed their families. And then in the afternoons, I would go to classes that focused on how marine resources were critical to many people and communities. In those classes, I learned that 10 to 12% of all the people in the world have a job that's based around fisheries or aquaculture, and that a third of the world's population, especially the world's poorest people, get their main source of protein from the ocean. On that island was the first time that I think I fully appreciated that you just can't separate nature and people, that the fate of people is completely intertwined with the health and the integrity of the ecosystems around them. And it was there that I really saw that good science could be used not only to preserve ecosystems, but also to preserve the resources that human beings depended on. I came to marine biology for the beauty of the ocean, and I stayed for all the people that depend on that ocean. My love for science and the ocean started about a decade ago. Now I'm halfway through my PhD. I've just finished my first paper. I've gotten grants to study kelp forests from Canada to Chile, and I'm about to submit a report to the International Union for the Conservation of Nature that will officially list an Oregon starfish as critically endangered. I think I can really say that I love the work that I do, and that I do feel like I can help make Oregon's oceans healthier and make our coastal communities stronger. But while there are days that I do feel like I'm kind of living the dream, it's not always easy and it's not always fun to be in science. As you've probably seen in the news, environmental scientists like me have a lot to be worried about these days. On the one hand, we see news articles every day about environmental destruction, forests being cut down, oceans warming and acidifying, ice caps melting, and polar bears drowning. And then on the other hand, we hear the president publicly denigrating scientists and calling them liars, and large swaths of the country following suit. There are a lot of days that I read articles like these and it just brings me to tears and it makes me want to quit. So far, I've explained to you why I became a scientist. Now I'd like to explain to you why, despite these frustrations, I stay a scientist, and why y'all should consider being scientists or resource managers. I stay in science for 3 reasons: love, progress, and opportunity. So let me explain those 3 in depth a little bit more. The first one I mentioned was love. I stay in science because I really, truly love what I do. I get to scuba dive for my job, to travel, to hang out in coffee shops and read the latest breaking research papers, and to work with a lot of other people who care so deeply about the ecosystems and the people around them. There are so many frustrating things about being a scientist, but at the end of the day, there's nothing else I'd rather be doing. The second reason I mentioned was progress. When I say progress, what I mean is there's so much good work already going on and so many examples of people finding ways to use their resources more sustainably in a way that makes ecosystems and communities stronger. For example, in 2000, all of the federally managed fisheries in the United States were overfished, meaning that those fisheries were fishing those species towards extinction. Every single one of those federally managed fisheries in 2000. Now, after 2 decades of work, more than 50% of those fisheries have been rebuilt and are now being fished at sustainable rates. And another one of my favorite examples, in British Columbia, some indigenous peoples, such as the Haida First Nation, are piloting experimental kelp forest restoration by removing hundreds of thousands of urchins each year from their coastlines, and in the process creating jobs, feeding Haida people with urchin roe, and bringing back miles of kelp forest. These are just 2 quick examples, but there are so many smart people finding creative solutions to our current problems of sustainability and environmental justice. I take so much inspiration from these signs of progress, from hearing others that have come before me and have managed to do so much. We're far, far away from solving our global problems, but these success stories show us examples of the way forward, and they give me hope. And then the last reason that I spoke of for why I stay in science was opportunity. I'm actually only 26 years old. I'm probably closer to your age than your parents' age. And as a member of this rising generation, I can see that things are changing. People of our generation aren't willing to let ecosystems be destroyed for corporate greed, and we aren't willing to ignore climate change or racial justice. Our generation understands that when the climate changes, when our towns and waterways are polluted, when the ecosystems are destroyed, it's often the poorest, most vulnerable people that get hurt the most. Things are changing, and it's people like us that are doing the changing. In this moment of transition, we have tremendous opportunity to re-envision our relationship with nature and our relationships with each other. I believe that scientists have a crucial role to play in this change, to use their work and their voices to advocate for smarter, better, and more equitable ways of doing things. Love, current progress, and the opportunities for change. Those are the reasons I stay in science. Being a scientist gives me so much. It gives me access to cutting-edge knowledge and passionate people, but maybe most importantly, it gives me the credibility and the platform to be able to help direct and be a part of the ongoing transition in our relationship with nature. I know that I'm not going to stop climate change. I'm not going to save the oceans. I'm not going to solve the issues of environmental justice, but I'm going to keep trying. And there are many people in this line of work that are trying to. And that's why I'm a scientist. So thank you all for listening.